Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia. Welcome back to another Humankind Emblematic District tier list guide video as we're covering the medieval era today. If you missed out on our previous episodes covering the ancient and classical eras, you can use the link in the description below to find the entire playlist. And as with those videos, we're going to be first doing an overview for each of these emblematic districts to cover their strengths and weaknesses before coming back here to rank them on our tier list. So kicking things off, we have the Baray for the Khmer. And this is a farmers and makers quarter dual district that exploits both food and industry. And it makes it incredibly powerful as these are the two default resources most commonly found on rivers. And because it exploits both, if you place this emblematic district next to rivers, you can retain both resources on the river tile, thus ensuring all bonuses from infrastructure buildings will be applied to those river tiles. And that is actually super strong. And to reinforce this playstyle, the building also gives +4 industry per adjacent river and a default of 5 food and +1 worker with a loss of 10 stability. So pretty standard. This is after the nerf in the last patch where it went from +1 industry per population to +4 industry per adjacent river. Previously, I think there was a +2 industry per adjacent river. So of course, it's not as strong as before, but because of the unique exploitation of food and industry, it is still quite a powerful emblematic district in my opinion. Then moving on to the Umayyads with the Grand Mosque. This is a research quarter that exploits science. You gain +3 science per number of attached territories. This type of bonus is quite strong into the late game when you can absorb cities to form mega cities with multiple attached territories to give you a really nice exponential yield of science from these emblematic districts. You'll also get +5 faith and +1 researcher slot with -10 stability. Then moving on to the Byzantines, you have the Hippodromos. And this is a market quarter that exploit money with a particular focus on the strategic resource of horse. For each horse resource you have control of inside your faction, regardless through trade or exploitation, you will gain +5 money per horse with each of your emblematic district. Also +3 money by default, and most importantly, if you construct this adjacent to your horse resource, you will gain +25 money. And that is actually super nice. So if you think about it, you want to have a lot of horse resources to make this building worth it. If those horse resources happen to be on the edge of territories, they become immensely better because you could put multiple ones adjacent to it, since you need to have a restriction of how many emblematic you can have in a territory. So it must be on the edge of your territory for you to get multiple adjacencies from multiple territories building the Hippodromos. You also get +1 trader slot on city outposts and -10 stability. Then we have the Kaiserdom from the Teutons, which is actually super unique in that it is a maker's quarter that exploit industries but produce faith. It actually produces a lot of faith. +1 faith per district in your city, and also +3 faith per adjacent district. So you can expect a ton of faith being produced by your Kaiserdom. However, it is still a bit questionable whether producing this much faith is actually worth it. Of course, if you're still trying to rush for a few late game tenants, it could be helpful. There's also a +3 influence on it with -10 stability. It is overall just a very interesting combination of bonuses with none of the extra bonuses being industry related. Then we have the Luxuries market from the Ghanaians, and this is a market quarter exploiting money. You get 1 extra money per number trade route. Of course, for each territories you have in the city, you have +1 money stacking per trade route. So your trade routes can become quite lucrative. And in the game Humankind, if you choose to play a very peaceful approach, each individual resource, whether it's strategic or luxury, can count as a trade route. So you could actually have a lot of trade routes and generate a lot of money from the Luxuries market. You also get +5 money by default and +3 extra adjacency for market quarter and 1 trader slot on the city or outpost and -10 stability. Then we have the Naust for the Norsemen, which is the unique emblematic harbor district that exploits food, industry, money, and science on all the water tiles that are 2 away from where you build your Naust. It counts as a harbor, it counts as a farmer's quarter and a market quarter, a very nice combination. It mainly functions as a farmer's quarter since you do get 1 extra farmer slot, which is lovely, plus 5 additional food for each adjacent coastal water or lake, which is also quite a big boost. And finally, the most powerful aspect of this building is you get plus 50 money from ransack on Empire. So essentially for every Naust you build, you can gain plus 50 extra money every time you ransack. So that can add up quite a bit depending on how many territories you have that's coastal or with a lake that you can build a Naust, and you can gain actually quite a bit of income from ransacking if you go the warpath. Speaking of going to war, we have the Orda for the Mongols. This once again is a unique outpost emblematic district that will be automatically constructed and converted for all existing outposts. However, these outposts cannot be attached in this era, so say goodbye to any expansionist star. And it has the added bonus of being able to build your emblematic unit using influence. And the most unique thing about the Orda that makes it different from the Wari and the Ordu is that it exploits all of the thems. Whereas the other 2 unique emblematic outpost buildings will only exploit food and industry like a regular outpost, the Orda actually exploits money and science. So if you find unique tiles or strategic resources, you can definitely choose to put the Orda next to them for a nice temporary boost of those resources in this era. Of course, once you move away from this era, if you don't transcend as the Mongols, you will lose all your Orda and they go back to being a basic outpost and you won't be able to exploit money and science. But this difference does make them quite unique. Then we have the Sacrificial altar for the Aztecs that exploits nothing. It doesn't function as any quarter. It simply provides 5 faith and plus 2 influence from any adjacent district and 5 points of stability. It does unlock a special effect when you sacrifice population that will give you the celebrated status on the city, adding a bit of stability. It's not a very good district with no production and no exploitation and only very limited influence for adjacent districts. Then we have the Scriptorium for the Frank. This is a research quarter focusing on science and exploiting science. It used to provide plus 2 influence per adjacent district. Now the adjacency must be research quarter. You do get a default amount of 5 science, 3 faith, and also 1 researcher slot with minus 10 stability as with most emblematic districts. Then finally we have the Stronghold for the English. This is a unique garrison emblematic district that also count as a farmer's quarter. So it also exploits food. It works very similar to the Cyclopean Fortress for the Mycenaeans in that it is a garrison that you can place anywhere within your territory. It will exploit all 7 tiles that it's centered around, and you'll pick up a large amount of food when you place it. Not only that, you'll gain plus 5 points of stability, plus 10 points to district fortification, 3 combat strength for all units in and adjacent to this district, and most of all, to play into the longbowman playstyle for the English, it will increase the range of any unit stationed on it by 2. That is actually incredibly powerful, given that longbowman has no line of sight restriction with indirect fire, and this plays very well into the agrarian focus of the English with their longbowman support, so it goes without saying that it is a very good emblematic district. So now that we have covered all 10, let's go back to our tier list and rank these. So we're going to start from the bottom like we usually do, and the worst emblematic district for this era in my opinion is the Sacrificial altar. Now the reason is pretty clear. This is the Aztec building that exploits no resources. It produces a little bit of faith and very limited influence. Anytime influence is required for adjacent district, it's not that good in my opinion, because you're ruining adjacency for the district that you're going to be building them next to, and you end up only gaining 2 influence per district, whereas you gain 2 influence per population by default anyways. The only nice thing about this district is you gain plus 5 points stability and ways to generate more stability with sacrificed population, even though in my opinion, sacrificed population have been nerfed quite a bit to the point where it's not that useful, as it's much better to retain the population for influence boost and other uses. So that's going to put this emblematic district at the D tier for us. Then moving up, we have the Kaiserdom at C. Now, at first glance, the Kaiserdom is not that bad because it is a maker's quarter and it does exploit industries. And the faith you gain from it is quite high since it's +1 faith per district per Kaiserdom. Therefore, depending on how many territories you have, you can actually generate quite a large sum of faith. My issue with the building is twofold. One, faith is not that useful into the late game if you have too much of it. Once you gain your 4 tenets, as long as you have enough to not get encroached on by neighboring religions, which often require you to go to war to wipe out their holy sites, I think typically having an overflow of faith is not rewarding in the game. So Kaiserdom is a bit of an overkill in that sense. But it is a maker quarter, so there are some values to it. You can build it adjacent to other makers quarter and forget about it. But the problem comes in that it doesn't provide a worker slot, which is its main weakness in my opinion. So I'm still going to slot it a bit down. It's not terrible, but it's not great. Then moving on to the B tier, we can start with the Luxuries market for the Ghanaians. So this building has the potential of generating immense wealth depending on how peaceful you play, how many trades you have set up. If you are going to play a very peaceful approach, making friends with your neighbors, amassing massive amount of trade for their resources, the Luxuries market can generate you a ton of wealth. If you can't do that, or if the map is scarce in terms of resources, then this emblematic district is going to struggle a bit. Also, money is not the strongest resource of the FIMs, so I am going to rank it a little bit lower and put it at B. Following it, we have the Hippodrome, which is also very map dependent. So this obviously relies on having horses. Having lots of horses on a map in general will benefit the Hippodrome. If you have a ton of horse resource or you're playing with abundant strategic resources, then this can be a godly emblematic district with the amount of money you can generate per horse, as well as being adjacent to horse. It provides a standard trader slot, so it functions pretty much as a more premium market quarter in that situation. However, you're not going to find yourself in a game with that many horse most of the time, so it's still going to sit in the middle of the pack at B. Then following them, we have the Scriptorium. So this is the science generating, faith generating, science emblematic research quarter for the Franks. It's not terrible in terms of bonuses you get on it because you pick up a little bit of faith, a little bit of influence, and a little bit of science, and you still get your researcher slot. So it functions like a pretty standard research quarter with some added benefits. It doesn't overkill the faith, but still provides you some. And you can also gain a little bit of influence boost by cluttering other research quarters next to it, which is what you want to do. However, it doesn't really shine, so I would put this as a low B and maybe even a high C rank here. But I think right now, putting it as a middle of the pack B rank is just fine. Then moving on to the A rank, we can start with the Grand Mosque. So the Grand Mosque is going to be the better research quarter for this era, with the fact that it has the +3 science per number of attached territories and also +5 faith. Compared to the Scriptorium that we just covered, it lacks the influence boost, but overall you gain a lot more science from this emblematic district, not only when you build it, but also as you scale into later eras when you can start absorbing cities, building larger cities with more territories. You also gain more faith off the bat with +5 versus +3 compared to the Scriptorium, and you get the same researcher slot with the -10 stability. Then moving on, we can also add the Orda into the A tier. This is very similar to the Ordu of the Hunnic Horde rush. This is now the Mongolian Horde rush, and the units are nice. They're not strong. They got a recent buff to go from 29 combat strength to 33 combat strength, so it's a little better than before. The cool things about the Orda is it doesn't cost anything to build, and they have the exploitation ability to pick up money and science, which actually makes a huge difference in my opinion for your outposts for this era. The inability to pick up expansionist stars because you cannot attach the Orda outpost is actually its biggest weakness in my opinion, because that's a loss of a huge amount of easy fame that you could use to try to win the game, since fame is the most important aspect of the game. Of course, if your Mongolian hordes can absolutely ransack your opponent and cripple them so that you can have a continued advantage into later eras to catch up on the fame that you lose here, it would still be very beneficial. So I think it's still worth an A tier rank here. Then joining them, we'll also put the Naust. Typically, most of the harbor emblematic district have been given a pretty high mark by me, and this is no different. The reason being it counts as a farmers and a market, so it gives natural adjacencies to other variants of the harbor and the default harbor districts on the sea. Meanwhile, you can connect it to either a market quarter on the coast or more farmer quarter. It focuses heavily on food, which is very useful. It also gives a farmer slot, which is also very useful. And typically the ramsack money can add up quite a bit. 50 each per Naust can become a huge number if you are thinking about how many territories you're going to have in the game. Then moving on to the S tier, we have the Baray and the Stronghold. So Baray, without saying, was probably the strongest emblematic district in the game before the nerf, since it provided +1 industry for population, allowing it to scale very strongly into the late game, while getting the dual exploitation of food and industry, which is super powerful, makes it a mini hamlet. And the bonuses with river was on it before, now it's just stronger. You typically want to use this when you have a ton of river to preserve their natural yield. So any type of infrastructure building you can provide for your river tiles, whether that's the food variants of irrigation, artificial reserves, or the industry variant with the water mills and so forth, can also be added on. You can plant forests onto your river tiles to add even more industry while preserving the food yield, get a few tenants to reinforce the river bonuses and the forest bonuses, and you have very powerful river tiles that are just naturally very high yielding, without investing any resources into those tiles, because you don't have to build districts to pick up those. You just have to get them through exploitation using things like the Baray. Then the Stronghold is more of a military play. Now, its key bonus is the fact that you can place this anywhere because it functions as a garrison, similar to the Cyclopean Fortress for the Mycenaeans. So when you place this emblematic district down, you get to pick up 7 new tiles of exploitation potentially in every territory, compared to placing adjacent district somewhere on the map, because if you already have a requirement for connecting to existing district, you can at most pick up 3 new tiles. So you're not going to get that much for each district, whereas this building will get you 7 fresh tiles for you to pick up food. So if you're in an area with very good food yield, even if it's only 2 points on the land, just building it gets you about 14 points of food. Not only that, it's a very strong military building, spawns unit, gives extra bonuses, increase the range of your unit, which really synergizes with your unique emblematic unit as well, which we don't typically consider, but it's kind of hard to ignore. And it scales incredibly well into the late game as well, because most late game units all are ranged with their gunpowder weapons, and this still functions for them as well, giving them increased range, giving them +3 combat strength. So it is a very good emblematic district in my opinion. Probably even better than the Baray, especially after the nerf. So this is our tier list for the medieval era emblematic districts. Hopefully you guys agree. If there's something I missed, or perhaps there's a way you use the district differently from me, where you think they can be stronger or weaker, feel free to comment them below, and we'll come back tomorrow and do the early modern emblematic districts. So until then, bye!